Let's get this sports podcast party started, all right?
The JAYREELZ podcast.
What is happening, my good people? Greetings. How are you? How's it going? How's everybody doing out there? What is the latest and greatest? Hope everybody's doing well, feeling fantastic, in excellent spirits. It's a holiday Monday honoring the late, great Dr. Martin Luther King for all that he stood for on this day. But on a much, much lesser scale, you know what I stand for when it comes to anything and everything happening in between the white lines and beyond, as this is the JAYREELZ podcast with your host, JAYREELZ. For my first timers, welcome aboard. And for those who've been banging with me going back to the very beginning, somewhere in the middle or even as early as this past Thursday, I welcome you guys and gals back. And now that the Final Four is set, just 3 more football games for the remainder of this season. And we have to go back and recap all that had taken place over the last 48 hours or so. And was it an improvement over the wild card weekend? 1,000%. But was it that much better? It was good enough, but certainly wasn't great. And even though you did get some thrilling moments there in pretty much all the games, maybe not so much the first game, but of course we'll unpack that. But to me, overall, it was an entertaining weekend. It certainly did have you at the edge of your seat in a couple of instances, and you had one big-time shocking upset. And that's where I'm going to start. Usually I go in regular order when it comes to these games. I like to start from the 4:30 game on Saturday leading up to last night's game. But what happened in Detroit there on Saturday night, I'm sure the fans and that region of the Motor City and beyond, for them to wake up yesterday, maybe even still today, with the knockout punch that was given by the Washington Commanders, I'm sure they're still feeling the after effects of that, as well as the head coach. As you know, he was certainly emotional in his post-game speech, which he usually is. But for a Lion team that played from in front all year long, had an 11-game winning streak, had to fight to the bitter end to get the 1 seed and have that coveted bye, for them to go from that to bye-bye for the postseason is absolutely shocking, alarming, no matter how you slice it. And we're going to give the Commanders their flowers. This isn't a thing where we're just going to pile on the Lions. We're just going to say, oh, what a terrible job, the lack of preparation, etc. But I will say this for starters. If Aaron Glenn and Ben Johnson, the defensive and offensive coordinators of the Lions, I'm sure they're going to get interviewed, and understandably and rightfully so for what they've done. But if anybody's going to look at what they saw there with that defense, no matter how depleted it was, and giving up 45 points, really 38 because they did have a pick 6. But for them to give up that many points under that defense, and for Ben Johnson, for some of these play calls that he had there, especially that one with Jameson Williams on that end around trying to be cute at 38-28. I mean, what are you doing there? I mean, that was just uncalled for. Certainly made you scratch your head. It was almost out of desperation and panic by the offensive coordinator. And I get it. It has to get by the head coach, Dan Campbell, before it's put out into the headset of Jared Goff. But some of these plays were just made you go bonkers. And with the sloppiness by the Lions there, the pick there right at the half when they looked like they were going to go in and they were unable to do so. There, what was the score at that time? It was 24, I believe it was 20, no, it was actually 31-21. And it was just a mess how they were just unable to get on track on that offense. And I don't care how many numbers they put up, and I know Goff threw for over 300 yards, but he had a terrible game. Badly timed interceptions, and you couldn't have asked for a worse game for this Lion team to play, especially in their building, knowing that they had the road to the Super Bowl. They didn't have to go anywhere outside of their friendly confines, and for them to spit the bit the way they did was just inexcusable and really just perturbing when you think about what they have accomplished throughout the course of this year. And if you want to piggyback off of last year, having the big year that they had to go to an NFC Championship game, this is as bad of a loss as you could actually have. And this is a franchise and a fan base that's been starving, that's been in the wilderness all these years. And I know Dan Campbell came out with a quote saying that the opportunity for their Super Bowl window is not closing, or it's in the process of being closed. To me, that's nonsense. Now, you have to make sure your team is intact. You certainly don't want to have guys jumping all over the place with free agency. You want to make sure you have your key guys there. We know Amon-Ra St. Brown signed his big deal. Goff, of course, the same. Aiden Hutchinson, I know he's going to look to get paid here, and it's a big part of your defense. But This was a game that I couldn't believe while I was watching it. And just when you thought they were going to get back in the game, and just when you thought that they were going to take advantage of certain opportunities, and they just didn't. And then when you look at even their defense, a huge part of that game at 31-28, where the Lions looked like they were going to be stopped there. They were about to go for a 4th and 2. And what happens? Encroachment. The Lions are offsides, which gives them a fresh set of downs, and then they punch it in the end zone to make it 38-28. And then on that ensuing drive, the Jamison Williamson play that I talked about, end around where he threw an option pass. I mean, what were they doing? And that was just indicative. And really, when you think about it, from the very start of this game, the opening kickoff by the Commanders, Zane Gonzalez, he kicks it out of bounds to where the Lions have the ball starting at the 40-yard line. And you would think, here they go. They're going to be clicking. They're going to be ready to go. And what happened? They went 3 and out. If that wasn't a sign of things to come in that game, boy, then as bad as it gets. But now with all that I've said about the Lions, I have to get to the Commanders. They are as cool as a cucumber. That quarterback, he is not rattled. He is not a guy that shows any panic on his face. He's a guy that is as cool as the other side of the pillow. The late, great Stuart Scott from ESPN said many, many moons ago. And even though they played from in front, now mind you, they trailed early, we understand, but once they got that pick six, that made it 24-14, and even though the Lions came back to get that score to make it 24-21, but they did play from in front, so they didn't have to show any type of urgency or get to a point where they had to press. No, they were aggressive, even from the opening kickoff for the most part, when they went for it there on 4th and 3, and they got stopped. And of course, later on, the 4th and 2 where they made it, and they're going to take chances here. Dan Quinn, they're going to go for the win. And you know what? You cannot look at him and say, what are you doing? I understand you want to take points. You're a road team. You have a young quarterback. But he is telling his team that we're out here to win, that we cannot settle for field goals. Now, it's going to be interesting to see what's going to happen in this next game, because just like last year in the aforementioned championship game with the Lions and 49ers, how Dan Campbell went for it twice instead of kicking field goals to at least keep the Niners at bay, but they gave them life. Is that going to happen here in this championship game? Because as we know, rookies do not make it this far in the postseason, as we saw many moons ago with Joe Flacco in his rookie year in 2008, where he went to a championship game against Pittsburgh. But they have not been able to get to the promised land, to a Super Bowl, to see whether or not they can win a championship. So that's going to be one thing we're going to look ahead and keep that receipt for this coming Sunday, 3 o'clock at Lincoln Financial. But everything that the Commanders did turned from stone to just shining pretty glass sculptures, or however you want to detail it, because for Jaden Daniels to be poised in the pocket and also to run with his legs, to extend plays, whatever he had to do to go along with the Terry McLaurins of the world. Also, De'Ami Brown, who did have a drop in the game, but also made plays. You got to give it up for Hutchinson, the other wide receiver. Brian Robinson with some big-time runs. That offense was clicking. Now, they're going to miss a key component of their offensive line, who tore his ACL. I forgot what quarter of the game. I think it was early on. But you got to worry about Sam Cosmi, a guy who is part of that offensive line, to keep Jaden Daniels upright and to not have him moving forward. That's going to be a big loss. But everything that the Commanders have done, whether it was in the passing game, whether it was on 3rd down, 4th down, being able to capitalize whatever what was in front of them, you have to give them credit. And Cliff Kingsbury, a guy who was thrown out with the trash there in Arizona, is now a guy that could be a head coaching candidate at some point here once their season is over. And you have to give up everything that has transpired there in D.C. And this game forthcoming for the first time since 1992 that they have not made it to an NFC Championship game. They are literally playing with house money. I mean, there's no pressure. All the pressure is going to be on the Eagles. We'll talk more about that on Thursday's podcast. But you have to give it up for what the Commanders have done, turning their franchise completely around. Obviously, starting off with the ownership there, Josh Harris, with the GM, the head coach, the quarterback. They have hit on all cylinders here. And they've come up with aces. As we all know, the prior 2 decades, it was nothing but in the tank, in the toilet, and just all types of stuff, whether it was on the field, in the front office, behind the scenes. It's just an ugly portrayal there when Daniel Snyder was at the helm. But now everything is coming up all coconuts and palm trees. So give it up for what they've done, and kudos to the Commanders. And the Lions, it is a long off season. You go 15-2 and to lose in the divisional round at home, that's as bad as it gets. And I don't even know what else to add there but that. So let's move on there. Now, I want to talk about last night's game with Ravens and Bills. I know I'm jumping around here before I go to Houston, Kansas City, and the Rams and Philly. That was a game that did not live up to the hype. Yes, it had a very good ending, a thrilling ending where Lamar Jackson went down the field, and that's what we wanted to see. We wanted to see in the money moments, in the biggest spots of the game, where they were down 8 points, for him to go down the length of the field, and he had all day. He could have called a cab. He could have checked his Netflix queue to see what he wanted to watch on the flight home. He could have ordered a pizza, especially on that touchdown from he to Isaiah Likely. But with Lamar Jackson, that first half, other than the opening drive, was one to forget. He threw a airmail interception, which was inexplicable. I don't know if Rashad Bateman looked like he ran a wrong route, if you saw his expression there, once that was intercepted. And then the fumble, which was inexcusable. He was holding it like a loaf of bread. I know he was trying to switch it from one hand to the next, but you can't do that. Just tuck it and hit the ground. And we get it with Lamar Jackson. He's always trying to make something out of nothing. But in that case, you're going to have to just eat it and live for another down. As it was, that was returned by Von Miller, which led to a touchdown run there by, a 2-yard run by Josh Allen. And they led 14-7. They had that big touchdown at the end of the first half to make it 21-10. And I thought that was going to be dangerous for Baltimore because the Bills had the ball coming out of the first half into the second half, and they did nothing with it. And then they marched down the length of the field only to kick a field goal there. But then they did get the touchdown, and then this is where I had a problem with the Ravens here as far as their head coach is concerned. You know I've had issues with him throughout. They get the touchdown there by Derrick Henry, and they ran the ball a lot. Derrick Henry only had 21 yards in the first half. Again, other than the opening drive, the Ravens didn't do much offensively. So for them to get the touchdown there to make it 21-19, and that was late in the third quarter. The game is close. You do not have to chase points at that juncture of the game. And this is first guess. This is while I'm watching. This isn't later on after the game or, doing a Monday morning quarterback. If this was fourth quarter with 5 minutes to go, absolutely, positively, you have to go for the 2 points there. But late in the third quarter, and that would have cut it to 21-20. So therefore, you don't know how the game is going to play out, obviously. But even if it's a situation where the Bills scored a touchdown to make it 28-20, you're still within one score there. It's not a automatic that, we have to go for 2 here just to be able to tie and have the game moving forward. No, you kick the extra point there. Even if they score a touchdown, you get the ball, you're still down by 1 score. As the game played out, they got the field goal there at 24-19, and then the big strip there by Terrell Bernard on Mark Andrews, who's usually sure-handed, but got the strip, was able to recover the fumble, and then they kicked a field goal there. I believe I may have my drives mixed up. 21-19. No, I think that's right. At 24-19, they stripped the ball, and then they got the field goal. So at 27-19, with Andrews' fumble, and now you have a scenario where they have to go down the length of the field, 88 yards, which they did. Lamar Jackson making big plays to Tylan Wallace, who got his only reception of the game, was wide open, got extra yards. Even Mark Andrews had a big catch there in the flat going up the right sideline. And then the touchdown pass to Isaiah Likely, which you thought to yourself, all right, they got to go for 2 here. Chances are they've been unsuccessful where they 1 for 4, I believe, on 2-point conversions, including that game against the Steelers, which brought me back. And then obviously the 2-point conversion early on in the game. Now everybody's going to pin it on Mark Andrews. He's going to be the guy that's the GOAT, and I'm not talking about greatest of all time. A guy who is very sure-handed, the security blanket for one Lamar Jackson. And what happened? The ball was in his hands. It wasn't a bad throw. It wasn't a low throw. It was pretty much right there in the breadbasket. But as he tried to corral it, he was unable to do so. Who knows if the ball was slick? Who knows if he was falling back with his momentum? He was unable to grasp the ball, but hits the turf there at New Highmark Field, or whatever the name of that stadium is. And the Bills live to see another day. And I have to say, the offense for the Bills, first half was good, but Josh Allen only threw for 127 yards. Yes, they did get some big yards on the ground by one James Cook. Yes, they were able to make plays in big times in order to set themselves up for field goals, but that was what kept the Ravens in the game. So the Bill offense certainly wasn't clicking on all cylinders. But they did make plays when they had to. And Josh Allen, obviously, he is a bull in the china shop. He got the touchdown runs and was able to punctuate that victory with that run there where the Ravens looked like they were going to have one last shot, but then they got the first down there, and that iced it after the missed onside kick that they got there. But the Ravens, a long offseason. This is not all on Lamar. That first half, he contributed to that, absolutely. But at least he delivered when the game was on the line, and even that two-point throw. It's not as if he airmailed it, or it's not as if he underthrew or tried to do a sidearm where it just sailed out of bounds, where you could say, oh, Lamar, you got to do better than that. So you can't pin it all on him. But the combination of the Andrews fumble, the drop there for the two-point conversion, yes, Lamar's interception didn't hurt him because that didn't lead to points, but that fumble, that did lead to a touchdown. And the Ravens in big spots, they're unable to rise to the occasion. I mean, what more can you say? And the Bills did just enough. They had a bend, don't break defense. Their offense, second half, didn't really do much. They only scored 6 points when you think about it. But they do live to see another day as they'll face the Chiefs next week in the AFC Championship game. And then as far as the early game yesterday, I tell you, it's a play that's forgotten now. But at 28-22, with time on their side, it was about 2 minutes, 3 minutes to go. And why in the hell, after a first down run, made it 2nd and 7, why was Nick Sirianni passing there? Where he had Jalen Hurts rolling out in the snow. He gets sacked. 12-yard loss. So now it's 3rd and 19 when they have to run the ball and they get the ball back, the Rams. In the process, they had that big pass to Puka Nacua, which set themselves up pretty much at the 20-yard line of the Eagles. And therefore, they got a big sack there on 3rd and 2, as we know. And then the pass that sailed out of bounds to Puka Nacua. And the Rams, they were, I'm sure, despondent, knowing that they had a golden opportunity to take the lead. And yes, they had some self-inflicted wounds early in that quarter. The fumble by Matthew Stafford on top of the fumble by Kyron Williams at 16-15, which extended those leads for the Eagles to 19-15 and 22-15. And give it up, Jake Elliott had some key field goals, although he missed extra points, and 2 of them on the game. And one of the field goals was from 44. The other 2 were chip shots. But in that weather, the conditions, the snow, etc., those were key field goals, which they needed in the worst way. But Matthew Stafford was valiant. He played very good. I understand the fumble cost them 3 points in that process, but he played well. He stood tall. The Ram defense was very good, other than trying to stop Saquon Barkley. And I'm sure Sean McVay's probably still having nightmares of Barkley running roughshod through his defense, dating back to the regular season game that Sunday night where he rushed for 255, and then yesterday rushed for 205 with 2 long touchdown runs. So Barkley, the monster year continues for him. But the Rams, they had a shot. And the Eagles were on the ropes there. And that play call on 2nd and 7 was mind-bogglingly stupid, because it set them back, and then the Rams lived to see another series to where they were able to get deep in the Eagles zone and were unfortunate to punch it in the end zone. Because I tell you this, if they would have scored and gotten the extra point to make it 29-28, Nick Sirianni may have been out on a rail. Because I don't care if it was the offensive coordinator, or I don't care who it was, or even Sirianni for that matter, that was just insane for them to call a rollout in the snow to try to be cute and get the Ram defense on their heels to try to either get a first down or get close to the sticks there to where they could ice the game. As it was, they dodged a missile, and therefore they lived to see an NFC Championship in their building against the Commanders. There isn't anywhere else I could cut that game. First half was tooth and nail back and forth, as you know. Jake Elliott having his issues with extra points. They kicked those field goals, like I mentioned, which were huge. But the Rams, they played tough. And Jared Verse had a big game, had to face all of the Philadelphia crowd for his comments, bashing the Philadelphia faithful there. But he came to play, and the Rams were good and absolutely had a chance to win that game, but they fell short and had a long flight home in the process. So the Eagles move on. And then what can I say about the opening game with Houston and Kansas City? I know the Chiefs be chiefing, as I'm going to call it, and I understand we're sick and tired of everything with the red and gold and with Taylor Swift and with Travis Kelce, who was pretty much the biggest star of the game. 7 for 117, had a touchdown. And yes, they got some minor contributions here and there, but Patrick Mahomes, again, not spectacular in the game, threw for 177 yards. The Texan defense was very good in the game. as they were trying to do whatever it takes to smother and get to Patrick Mahomes. And yes, we could talk about the flags where he was trying to run and he got a personal foul, which that was nonsense, and even Aikman went nuts over that. The call in the first half on Will Anderson Jr., they're going to call that no matter what, even though when you think about it, in the Raven-Bill game where Lamar Jackson got tackled out of bounds and he didn't throw a flag there, which I was surprised, because you know they want to protect the quarterbacks at all costs, but with Mahomes, he's going to get the Michael Jordan treatment, as we know. You breathe on him, you're going to get 15 yards, which is a shame. But I don't know if that's going to be good moving forward, because now you're going to get, granted that the game is in Arrowhead, so who knows what kind of flags you're going to get there if you're the Chiefs. But as far as the game there on Saturday, Houston's defense came to play. Got to give it up. But the Texans, they were just under siege by the Chief pass rush, and George Karlaftis is looking like Jared Allen. Look him up, the former Chief and Minnesota Viking. The guy's been unstoppable. That guy got 3 sacks in the game, I think 3.5, but I know 3 for sure. Was just all in the backfield and all in C.J. Stroud's mug. And the Texans, yes, even after at 13-3, they get the ball, they go on that long drive, which ate up the majority of the third quarter clock. Was at 15 plays, 70-some-odd yards, and they get it into the end zone. And then, of course, Kaimi Fairbairn missing extra points, missed a field goal badly from 55. You could certainly question whether or not they should have even kicked a field goal that far. Granted that a lot of these kickers can make those kicks, but that was dubious when you think about it. And special teams was just terrible when you think about it throughout the course of the day for the Chiefs, for the Texans. The opening kickoff was ran back deep into Texan territory to where Chris Boyd is shoving the special teams coach. I mean, what the hell's going on there? But the Texans, despite the fact that they were in the game, and even though they weren't a threat to win this game by any means, yes, at 13-12, but then when the Chiefs come back and they punch it in the end zone, that was the game. Let's face it, because they had to hold them to a field goal there. If you had any thoughts of the Texans pulling off an upset or even taking the lead in the game at that point. But for Houston, they're a team that they're still a couple of pieces away. And all they're going to be able to do is win that wild card game in their building and then lose like they have, 6 times now in their franchise's history that they have not been able to get to an AFC Championship game. And for the Kansas City Chiefs, it's the same old, same old. I mean, what more can you say? This team that was 15-2 and has won their first playoff game, they have done it in unspectacular-like fashion. And if you listen to the podcast, I've talked about it ad nauseum. They've skated by in these games. They've been able to win, whether by block field goals or whether by just poor decision-making on the other team with their coaching staff, or just being able to make big plays in big moments and get clutch field goals. I mean, that's pretty much been the Chiefs. This is not the Chief team of 2, 3, 4 years ago where they're going to put 35 on you. And who knows, maybe at some point they may do that here in these next 2 ball games, especially if they get past this next one. But this is a team that has done it with guts, guile, maybe even some scotch tape and bubblegum in the process, because for whatever the reason, they know how to win. It doesn't matter what the conditions are. It doesn't matter. They can win 17-10 or they can win maybe even 31-28 when it's all said and done. Not to say that we've seen them win those 31-28 games. There hasn't been a lot of them. But now, let's see what the Chiefs are going to do as they advance to their 7th straight AFC Championship game. And that's what you have here with the weekend. I wish I could add more. I wish there was more drama, more coaching decisions. Other than the Harbaugh going for 2 there, you didn't really have much. And maybe the play calling there in the Detroit side of the Commander-Lion game, that's what you have. And as far as my early thoughts on the games this coming weekend, I will say this, and not because I hate the Ravens being a Steeler fan, but Buffalo, Kansas City is going to be more intriguing, I think, than Baltimore, Kansas City, and for this reason only. We've seen the Bills beat the Chiefs in the regular season. In fact, what did they beat them? I think 4 of the last 5 years, or whatever it's been. They have not beaten them in the playoffs. They are 0-4 against them. And now they have another opportunity. They have to go to Arrowhead to do it, but now they have another opportunity in front of them to slay that dragon, to slay the beast. And I'm sure there are a ton of NFL fans, and including yours truly. As much as I'd love to see history, as much as I couldn't stand the Patriots, but I wanted to see them have an undefeated season in Super Bowl 42, as we all know they lost to the Giants. And for the Chiefs to be this close to getting a three-peat in the Super Bowl ever, which we've never seen. And yes, would it be cool to witness that? Absolutely, because it has never been done. But you know what? Would I shed a tear if the Chiefs do not win on Sunday? Absolutely not. So let Buffalo have their time. Let them get to a Super Bowl. And I will say this. A Buffalo-Washington Super Bowl, although it doesn't sound sexy, and it's going to bring up the bad memory of, what is it, off the top of my head, Super Bowl 26, I believe, in Minneapolis, where Thurman Thomas lost his helmet and the Redskins at the time had a 24-0 halftime lead against Buffalo. Yes, you're going to think about that game and you're going to think about, maybe I don't want to have a Washington-Buffalo Super Bowl. But guess what? You'll have two teams going to a Super Bowl for the first time in forever. And in fact, for the Washington franchise, that's the last time they won a Super Bowl. So, and Buffalo hasn't won one at all. Maybe that would be the Super Bowl everybody wants to see. I don't know if people want to see KC in Philadelphia again. And I don't know if people want to see KC in Washington, because that's certainly not a sexy matchup, despite the fact that with all the magic that is around the coach and the quarterback right now, and even the whole organization for that matter, maybe that would be a pretty interesting Super Bowl. But, and I don't know if people want to see Buffalo, Philadelphia. So right now, those are my early thoughts about the Super Bowl. And as far as the Washington-Philly game, I know it's the third time around. We saw Washington win. If it wasn't for Devontae Smith drop, the Eagles would have won that game. But who knows? Would I be shocked if Washington goes in there to beat Philly? I can't say I would be, considering what they did, granted indoors and in a fast track. But they're going to need to have that type of performance where they're going to have to get 2, 3, 4 turnovers in order for them to win. But let me throw this at you. It's not as if Jalen Hurts lit the scoreboard on fire, even though he had that rushing touchdown and was all Saquon Barkley. He only threw for 128 yards. Mind you, it's very economic, 15 for 20, but it's not as if they're throwing the ball deep down the field. Only against the Steelers will the Eagles and the Chiefs have big-time days, as you saw there in the month of December. But who knows? Those are my early thoughts right now as far as the championship games. Obviously, I'll unpack and uncover all that on Thursday's podcast and even get a feel for what the NFL would like, despite the fact that they'll get $100 million even if it's Carolina, Jacksonville in a Super Bowl. But I would think that if you gave them truth serum, what Super Bowl matchup they would like to see, I'll share that on Thursday's podcast, so you have to tune in at that time. But besides that, anything else happening in the NFL? Nothing much. I know the Bears, with the whole head coaching search, they have inquired about Mike Tomlin, and the Art Rooney and the hierarchy there, Omar Khan, etc., just hung up the phone. So you know Tomlin's not going anywhere. So unless there's going to be a meeting of the minds where they're just going to have a mutual parting of the ways, but that's not going to happen with 2 years left on Tomlin's deal, and with the Steeler coaching ranks as it is, 3 coaches in the last 55 years, that's not going to happen. So Steeler fans just have to grin and bear it. So that's what you have there with the NFL. Now let me transition, as I keep it with football, but now to go to the collegiate circuit. There is a college football championship on the line tonight, and this is where college football, they're going to have to pivot and not even think hard. This is a no-brainer. This college football championship tonight between Notre Dame and Ohio State, people are probably thinking, oh wait, didn't they play that game already? Or there's other people thinking, oh wait, that's tonight? They have to play this game before divisional weekend. There is no ifs, ands, buts, maybes about it. This is an afterthought right now. And unless you live or from South Bend or from Columbus, it's almost as if nobody else in the country cares. Now, yes, I'm sure that the NFL now put aside here after a big weekend. Now people are thinking, oh, what can I watch tonight? Oh, wait, national championship. But again, it's almost has to be put on alert. This isn't a situation where the games, the semifinal games, which were played 2 Thursdays and Fridays ago, where the game, if it was played this past Thursday, there would be some juice for the game. Or maybe even Friday night for that matter. But because the NFL, as we all know, just swallows and at the same time regurgitates and spits out any sport, any league in its wake, that the college football playoff is almost, like I said, it's an afterthought. It's almost as if, oh, wait a second, I thought this game was already played. No, you're going to have it tonight as the college football season will conclude, and a long one, I might add, dating back to a month ago today when you think about it, December the 20th. And all I'm going to say about the game tonight is this. I'm going to root for Notre Dame. I never thought I'd say that as long as I'm alive and breathing, because I am not a Notre Dame fan in the least. And for those that are curious, living in the Northeast, not having a college football team to root for, I never gravitated to a particular team. I will say as a boy, because I was being a huge Steeler fan, I did root for the Pittsburgh Panthers, only because I figured, it was uniform, the pro football team with the college football team. Tony Dorsett, Dan Marino, Hugh Green, guys in that era. But since then, I got off it and don't really have a college football team that I root for. But Notre Dame was one I did not. You could 100% take that to the bank. But I'm going to root for them only to see an upset, despite the fact that they're a 7 seed over the 8-seeded Buckeyes. But I think Ohio State, this is going to be their game to win tonight. And I think Notre Dame could win the game. And this is going to be the two determining factors in my eyes. How the Notre Dame defense is going to play against Will Howard. Will he have another big game in him? Will the running game with Treveyon, I can't pronounce his name, Henderson, how they're going to perform there, what their defense is going to do to try to slow down that offense, and how they're going to try to make Will Howard out to be a mere mortal. And then the flip side of that is that Notre Dame running game is going to have to be stout, because I don't know about Riley Leonard. He's going to have to make a play or two against this Ohio State defense, and if he doesn't, I think it's going to be curtains for the Fighting Irish. And that's how I look at this game. If Notre Dame's going to run the ball with any efficiency, to have Leonard make a few plays and even some plays with his legs, because we all know that he's efficient with his legs more so than with his arm. And if they could do that, Notre Dame has a very good shot. Now, of course, their defense is stout, and if they're able to uphold their end of the bargain, I think that could go a long way into them winning this game. But to just bank on their defense to win this game with not having a lot from their quarterback or from their offense, unless they're going to get 5 turnovers guaranteed, I can't see it. I think Ohio State, I don't know what the spread is. I think they have a big, let me see. I can pull that up real quick. In fact, they're a 9.5-point favorite in the game. I don't know if that's fluctuated since. I think that's going to be more of a backdoor cover if you ask me. I could see it being maybe not tight. Maybe it's 23-16 and then they get the backdoor cover. But I think Ohio State will prevail when it's all said and done. Maybe I'll stick with that score. I'll say 30-16. The Buckeyes, when it's all said and done. But to me, it's all going to be on what the offense of Notre Dame's going to do, more so than what Ohio State's going to do. Because Ohio State, you think they're going to get their yards, they're going to be very productive. Now, we understand Notre Dame, they're going to come at their running game and come at Will Howard. But at the same time, is it going to be a thing where Notre Dame, they're going to have a bunch of 3-and-outs where you're going to have to rely on the defense to bail you out throughout the course of the night? If that's going to happen, you can forget about it. That's where Ohio State's going to go running away, I think. But you can't factor in turnovers. You can't factor in special teams plays, block punts, field goals, things like that, missed field goals, and the like. So I think Ohio State right now is the better team. And I think that they do have a lot of magic. Same for Notre Dame, for that matter. I don't think a lot of people thought Notre Dame was going to get to a championship game. And here they are. But although I'll be rooting for Notre Dame, and I'm hoping for a close game, but let's see if that's going to be the case, whether or not they're going to pull off an upset card there in the national championship tonight. And even though I'll talk about it on Thursday's podcast, but certainly stay tuned to the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ for any instant reactions, if it's a nail biter or if something crazy goes on in the game, or the next day where I'll recap it and give you my thoughts on what has taken place. All right, now let me turn my attention as I lace up the high tops. And on this Martin Luther King Day, you know you're going to have a bunch of afternoon games. And you have a couple of decent games, which I'll get to. But the NBA, really the only story that I could unfold here, and I've talked about this over the last couple of podcasts, is the Jimmy Butler saga down in Miami. And now that he's back on the team, the 7-game suspension was over. There may have been a meeting of the minds there, knowing that they just couldn't put Butler on ice until they could try to broker a trade, because trading Butler, as I mentioned then, and I'll briefly touch on it now, is not going to be easy. He's a guy that's in the last year of a contract. Granted that he does have a player option for next year, which you know he's going to decline. So he doesn't want to be on the Heat anymore. He understands he has to be the good soldier for now. But remember, he has whatever left on his $49.5 million deal this year. But what you're going to get back is going to have to be another expiring contract, or you're not going to get high draft picks. You're not going to get a young player. You're going to get something that's going to be equivalent. You may get a second-round pick or a couple of second-round picks in the process. But here's the other thing. If you're going to try to facilitate a trade here, if you're Pat Riley, you're going to have to get a third team involved, because you're not going to get Bradley Beal. And even the Heat said, we don't want Beal and his $50 million for the next couple of years. You're not going to get that. So you're going to have to get a third team involved. You're going to have to really be creative here if you're Pat Riley in order to get Butler off the team. So I'm sure he's working the phones and getting together with his front office to see what they could do to try to get Butler out of here. And Butler, during his press conference when he came back on Friday night's game after that blowout loss to Denver, or before the blowout loss to Denver, how he said no comment, saying that, do you think you can work with these guys? Or he said, I'm happy to be with these guys. And even though there were some guys that tapped in, there were some that didn't, and we know who they are. But for Butler to come out and say the truth will come out in due time and all that, this is going to be an ongoing mess, I think, unless Pat Riley has a couple of aces up his sleeve where he's going to be able to have another team or two procure the services of Butler in order for him to get back whatever he can get. And I'm sure at this point, just some warm bodies and maybe a draft pick would be suffice. But who knows what is going to take place. Now, the trade deadline, let me look that up. It's before the All-Star break. I know it's usually in the first week of February. NBA trade deadline as I do this on the fly. So for Riley, he's only going to have, in essence, 2.5 weeks because the deadline is at 3 o'clock on Thursday, February 6th. So he does have time. But because he has to contact several teams and it isn't a guarantee that he's just going to get the one team that's going to unload their big contract or their expiring contract just to get Jimmy Butler. And we're going to have to see how this will all unfold because Butler, obviously he's checked out. I understand he's there and he's going to put forth an effort and he's going to, again, be the good soldier. He's not going to try to tank or try to walk out. I don't think he would do that, despite the fact that he does have a track record, whether it was in Minnesota, in particular Minnesota, Chicago, maybe not so much, Philadelphia. Who knows if he wore out his welcome there in his half season there, and then now Miami. He's definitely wants out of South Beach, but we'll have to wait and see on whether or not Butler is going to be jettisoned here over the course of the next 2.5 weeks. So that's going to be the continuing theme here as we move it along. As far as that, any health issues, I know Chet Holmgren, he'll be reevaluated in the next 3 to 5 weeks as the Thunder's still playing from in front there out west, as we know. Remember, he had a pelvic fracture there back in early November, so they reevaluated him after 8 to 10 weeks. Actually, it's been about, a little bit more than 10 weeks. So now it's going to be another 3 to 5 before you can even think about him coming back to the lineup. So you have that to deal with. But other than that, before I take a look at the schedule here for today and for the next couple of days, throughout the league, we know OKC and Cleveland. I know that the Thunder were able to exact some revenge over the Cavaliers on that Thursday night game there where you saw a 20-point blowout, the biggest loss by the Cavaliers this year. But even with that, it certainly doesn't hurt them as far as their stead in the standings because the Cavaliers currently have a 7-game and a 6.5-game lead over the Celtics. Celtics currently with a 3-game lead over the Knicks. So if they could continue that separation, the Cavaliers look like they're going to be home free for a 1 seed where a lot of teams now have already made it to the halfway point. 35-6 for Cleveland. That's 41. So do the math, people, out of an 82-game season. So a lot of people, or I should say a lot of teams have made it to the halfway point. Some have even surpassed that, whether you're the Knicks. They played 43 games. And some of the teams, Oklahoma City's already played 42. And so on. So with the East, Bucks inching close to the Knicks are just a game behind them with 2 games in hand, but 2 behind them in the standings for the 3rd seed. And then you have the Pacers, Hawks, Magic separated by a game and a half. Heat, a half game behind the Magic, who the Magic have now lost 3 in a row, including a blowout loss in Boston. And then the Pistons, who I talked about playing well, they actually have now lost 2 in a row. The Bulls have lost 5 in a row here. As the Sixers, who are on the outside looking in, but they're 2 games behind them, but 1 game and a loss behind that 10 seed. And I'm sure the Sixers, although they do not want to exhale once they get to that 7 to 10 range, but I'm sure that's a threshold that they're looking at, knowing that they dug themselves a big hole and now are close to coming out of it. And then the rest of the conference, forget about Nets, Charlotte, Toronto, and Raptors. The Raptors and Wizards. And then out west, Houston with a 2-game lead over the Grizz. Nuggets, who have now won 2 in a row in their Florida trip, not only beating the Heat, but also the Magic there yesterday. Clippers, then Lakers, and then you have a logjam there from 6 through, I'll even go as far as 11. Think about this. You have the Lakers, Mavericks, T-Wolves, Kings, who have played well here, now won 9 of 10 and have righted the ship 13 of 19 when they axed Mike Brown, and now they're 9 and 1 since. And then the Suns, also coupled with the Warriors, who are on the outside looking in because the Suns have the 10 seed right now at 21 and 20. And although the Warriors have the same record, but I guess with tiebreakers, they're on the outside looking in at this moment. But between 6 through 11, all those teams are separated by a game and a half. So you know there's going to be a lot of shuffling going on here between now and you would think the remainder of the season, unless one of these teams happen to separate themselves from the pack. So you got to keep that in mind here as we enter the second half of the season. And as far as the schedule for today, who knows, by the time you listen to this, a lot of these games will already be in the bag. But here are your schedules for today. Right now, Dallas and Charlotte, as I'm getting a late start on this podcast, they're currently playing. No big whoop because Charlotte's going nowhere. Detroit at Houston, good game there. Minnesota at Memphis, another good one. Hawks playing the Knicks, a game to watch out for. Phoenix and Cleveland, a game where Phoenix trying to go up in the standings there. Boston at Golden State at 5 o'clock. That's your TNT. And you have a couple of TNT games where you have Minnesota at Memphis at 2:30, followed by Boston at Golden State. You don't have a triple header there tonight because the night games are bad. Utah, New Orleans, Chicago at the Clippers. And then tomorrow you'll have Knicks and Nets for those who care. Philadelphia at Denver. So you get Jokic and Embiid. Who knows if Embiid is healthy? Because from one day to the next, I believe he had an issue with his knee. So who knows if he's going to suit up for the game there tomorrow night. And then on Wednesday, Detroit at Atlanta. Kevin Durant returns back to Brooklyn. He did so last year, if you recall. But Phoenix will be in Brooklyn there on Wednesday night for those who care. For the 40 Brooklyn Net fans. Minnesota at Dallas. Cleveland at Houston. Boston at the Clippers, and then they'll play the Lakers the following night as the Celtics, of course, are on a West Coast trip. That is your NBA there for today and for the early part of this week. Now as I lace up my skates to go through what's happening in the National Hockey League, and you had a feat, an accomplishment, an achievement happened for the first time in the 100-plus year of what's happening on ice. And this goes in the category of just when you've seen it all, you haven't. And usually that's for baseball, because baseball, and you, of course you could say that for all the sports, I get that. Baseball more in particular, for whatever the reason. But Friday night in Buffalo, you had the backup goalie who's now your starting goalie, because if you recall, the Pittsburgh Penguins, they waived Tristan Jarry, who had been awful this year, save percentage in the 800s or 880s, goals against 330s. Not having a good year, so they said goodbye to him, and they brought up, and you know me with these names, people, so you got to forgive me, Alex Nedeljkovic, I guess he's pronounced it, one more time here. Let's regroup. Nedeljkovic. Say that 3 times, JAYREELZ. So Alex Nedeljkovic, who now is your starting goalie against the Sabres, who have been reeling, as we know, not only did he record a goal there late in the game, took the puck from behind the net, was able to turn around, aim for the net, got it in, but also in the game recorded an assist. So for the first time in National Hockey League history, you had a goalie record a goal and an assist in the same game. So think about that. Never been done. Doesn't matter if you're Billy Smith, the first goaltender to record a goal, or Ron Hextall, or Martin Brodeur, or go down the list of goaltenders who have scored goals this year. You also had another goal earlier this year, I believe. Wasn't it, I don't know if it was Jeremy Swayman. I know it was another goaltender that got a goal this year. Maybe it was the Minnesota Wild. Be that as it may, here it is. You had the Penguin goaltender who's now been anointed as the starter, and all he did was score a goal and an assist that has not been done in the league's history. So congratulations to him. Kudos to what he did and the Penguins as they try to get some tracking and get some traction there in the Metropolitan and obviously in the Eastern Conference. And speaking of which, you have the Alexander Ovechkin and the Washington Capitals, who have played very well, 67 points. Actually, the most in the sport. Let me just double check that. Yes, they have the most points in the sport as of right now, and he got his 874th goal the other day, which now has him 20 goals to tie, 21 to surpass the great one, Wayne Gretzky, and with that 874th goal, he got it in overtime against Ottawa as a game winner. So kudos to him as the Capitals continue to keep rolling. And I will say this, with the year that they've had, and they've won 4 in a row, and now has some separation in the Metropolitan Division, because now they have an 11-point lead over the Devils, who, remember, the Devils were pretty much from in front all year long, and now the Capitals are putting some distance between them and the Devils. There's going to be a lot of pressure on this team to win it. And I understand when you're the President's Trophy winner, just ask the Rangers last year, and obviously the Bruins 2 years ago when they had that historic season, it is not a given that you're going to have a red carpet to a Stanley Cup final. So not to say they got to ease off the pedal here, but the Capitals playing more than what anybody could ever imagine or expect, led by their 39-year-old captain, who missed 5 weeks with a broken leg, and now is picked up pretty much where he left off. And if they have a year where they're going to have 110 points and maybe get a President's Trophy, or let's say even if they don't do that, but they have a 1 seed in the conference, the bullseye is going to be on them. That's all there is to it. I don't want to hear, they had a nice season. If they lose in the first round, the second round, there are going to be expectations. And especially with Ovechkin playing, as crazy as this going to sound, close to the peak of his powers at almost age 40. Take that into consideration, people, because people go, no, there's going to be no pressure. Who cares about the Capitals? All right, you can say that now on January 20th. But if on April 20th, 3 months from now, when the playoffs begin, I don't want to hear it. And if they're a 1 seed in the conference, all right, they could be a 2 seed, let's say if Toronto, or even if the Panthers get hot, all right, fine. But there's going to be some expectations on this Capital team to go far, and I'll just leave it at that. So that's what you have there with the Caps. Everybody else, there's some teams that have hit the skids here. Golden Knights. Now Edmonton is tied with them in the Pacific, and Edmonton, they may have a situation where their captain and perennial MVP candidate Connor McDavid, who is facing a hearing today, could get suspended, where he got into it with Tyler Myers, the Canuck forward there, I believe it was on Saturday night, where they were high-sticking one another and just mucking it up and going at it. Of course, the gloves weren't dropped. But for McDavid, he would probably face a game, I would think at the best, maybe 2. And if that's the case, I believe he was suspended 1 time earlier in his career for a high stick, or maybe I think for boarding somebody. But we'll see what's going to happen with McDavid, as he could see some time out here, which isn't good timing considering that they've now got themselves in a dead heat for first place in the Pacific. So we'll see what's going to happen there. The Jets have separated themselves from the Stars a little bit in the Central. And then Toronto, who's not going to have John Tavares, he's on the IR for some time. So we'll see what's going to happen there. But they have a 3-point advantage over Florida. That's what you have in the National Hockey League. And as far as the schedule for these next few days are the following. Your afternoon matchup, San Jose at Boston, considering it is MLK Day. They're underway. Minnesota at Colorado, good game there, 3 o'clock in the Rocky Mountains. Then you have St. Louis at Vegas. Columbus at the Islanders. They played the Rangers there the other night, so they've been in town the last couple of days for those who care. Tampa at Toronto, good game there, as Tampa's how many points behind? I'll take a look at that in a second. Winnipeg, Utah, Pittsburgh at LA. Then tomorrow, Carolina at Dallas is pretty much a highlight game there. Washington at Edmonton, throw that out there. It'd be nice if McDavid plays, but we'll have to see with the suspensions. Buffalo, Vancouver, Buffalo's terrible. And then Wednesday, Winnipeg or Colorado, Florida, LA, Boston at the Devils. So you got a few good games there to chew on here over the next few days for the hockey fan. Now, let me get into the batter's box. This is going to be brief, people. Well, not really so, because there's been a couple of deaths that I got to announce, which obviously is not good. But this one I'll keep brief, and all I will say is this. Do we even watch baseball in 2025? Do we even turn on the sets opening day? Maybe opening day. All right, we'll watch our teams. Hope springs eternal. Let's see what happens there. But by the time you get to the All-Star break, even if your team's doing well, depending on whatever city that you live in, and I get it if you're in Pittsburgh or in Miami or in Colorado or name Tampa, name the team that is not going to have a big year. Your season may be over by the All-Star break, but for those who are on the fringe, maybe can get a shot to go into the playoffs, whether you're Arizona or even the Mets for that matter, teams like that may not win a division, but will hold out some hope to see if they could get into the dance, because as we all know, a wing and a prayer. Maybe you get to a championship series or a World Series, similar to what the Mets and the Diamondbacks have done the last couple of years. But as you get deeper into the baseball season, and here it is in the middle of January on Martin Luther King Day, do I declare that the Los Angeles Dodgers are the 2025 World Series champions? I know that's not going out on a limb, and I know that is very bold to say that because the season does have to play out. But what we witnessed here over the last few days in the baseball world, where the Dodgers signed Roki Sasaki, and I talked about this on Thursday's podcast, whether the three teams, the three finalists, whether it's the Toronto Blue Jays, where he could have been the man, or the San Diego Padres, where he could have tried to beat the man, obviously Padres-Dodgers in the division, but no, he threw that all aside so he could be with the men, a la Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto, in a Dodger rotation which is locked, loaded, stacked beyond belief. So he does that, and hey, he could choose to sign wherever he wants. And as much as we could sit here and kill the Dodgers, as much as we could say, oh, it's unfair, how could they get away with this, so on and so forth, well, I got news for you people. There's no salary cap in baseball, so you could sign whomever you want. You could sign every all-star known to man. You could sign any international player. You could sign any reliever. Oh, I might add, Tanner Scott, the left-hander from the Marlins by way of San Diego, now goes up the 405 freeway and will park in a Dodger uniform for the next 4 years. So not only do they stack onto their bullpen with Michael Kopech, with guys like Blake Trinan, to go along with their rotation, a la the aforementioned Ohtani, the aforementioned Yamamoto, the aforementioned Sasaki, Tyler Glasnow, Blake Snell, who they tacked onto their rotation at the start of this thing. You also have Dustin May coming back from Tommy John. You have Bobby Miller coming back. Who knows if Clayton Kershaw, I get it, aging, and will pretty much be a hood ornament if he does come back for one more year. So, and I forgot about the lineup. You brought back Teoscar Hernandez. You signed Tommy Edman. You already have Freddie Freeman. You have Mookie Betts. You have Shohei Ohtani. Why watch baseball? Why? The team could literally have a six-man pitching rotation based on the pitchers that I just detailed. They have a bullpen that is stacked. They have a lineup that is stacked. They won a World Series last year. And I kidded, when they got Yamamoto and Ohtani last year, it was World Series sweep or bust. And guess what? They were one game close from doing that. What is it going to be this year? Playoff sweep or bust? That means sweeping through the Divisional Round, sweeping through the LCS, and sweeping through the World Series, because anything short of that would be a major disappointment in La La Land? I rest my case. There's nothing else to add. There's nothing else to discuss. There's nothing else to say. And by the way, let's go back to it's unfair. I can't believe they could do this. How could they stack their team and how could they be so loaded? 3 words, people. 4 words. Let me rephrase that. There's no salary cap. Exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. And I got news for you before I pivot. If baseball, the powers that be, meaning Rob Manfred and company, whenever the CBA is up and you know they're going to be fighting like cats and dogs, that would be their time to say, we have to insert a salary cap. That's it. Forget about this luxury tax nonsense, put up a salary cap. Because even if the baseball goes over to the wilderness for 2 years before they regroup and hammer out a salary cap, which would be great for the sport, what has it done for the NFL? What has it done for the NBA? I get it. It's a luxury tax, etc. But for the most part, they have a salary cap. And even though we have the second apron and all that, where they revised that, but still, you can't go crazy signing all these players. And the National Hockey League, the same. Major League Baseball needs to adopt that. And until you do that, teams will be at free will to sign players left and right. Now, as far as the 2 deaths, sad, Bob Uecker, more known as a broadcaster. Yes, he was a player, catcher on the 64 Cardinals and won a World Series, of course, the Milwaukee Brewers, and a longtime Brewer broadcaster, died at the age of 90. The cause of death unknown, but we all know how much of a fixture he was in the sport. A great ambassador, not only known for the commercials, the Miller Lite commercials, where he was down there at the field thinking that he had box seats and telling the ticket takers and the ushers there where, is this where my seat is? Get out of here, buddy. I must be in the front row. And with the Major League movies just a bit outside, he was iconic as far as him being a guy that loved baseball, that made it about the game. Obviously, in the Milwaukee, Wisconsin region, is known as a deity there, but unfortunately passes away at the age of 90. Thoughts, prayers, and condolences go out to the Major League Baseball, to the Brewer family, the Uecker family, obviously a big loss there. And of course, a lot of the players went to Twitter and shared their condolences on how great of a man that Uecker was, and understandably and rightfully so, as he transitions at the age of 90. And then yesterday you had Jeff Torborg, the first manager in Marlin history, as well as a former Major League AL Manager of the Year back in 1990 with the White Sox, was also a Met manager for the 92-93 season. And boy, those are some seasons that the Met fan do not want to remember, that's for sure. But at the age of 83, from Westfield, New Jersey, right on the other side of the bridge, passes away, age of 83. Again, cause of death unknown. Thoughts, prayers, condolences go out to the Torborg family as he also transitions at the age of 83. Very good man. I believe that very friendly, accommodating, good to the media, and just sad to know of his passing there yesterday. And then let me break out the tennis racket as I wrap up with the US Open. You hear me, people? With the Australian Open. My apologies to the Aussies down under. And you've had a very interesting last few days here at the Australian Open, where you've heard a lot of chirping from players, chirping from the media, and a scenario where now as you get into the second week, whether it was Novak Djokovic, and I guess I'll start with him, as he has a big an enormous quarterfinal matchup against Carlos Alcaraz, which will be tomorrow, and everybody's going to be on pins and needles to see what's going to happen there. Now remember, that's on Jannik Sinner's side of the draw, who he just beat Holger Rune, so he's gone and toast for the tournament. But we may see a scenario where you'll have Sinner go up against either Djokovic or Alcaraz. Now, I believe you have to wait till you get to the semifinal, of course, because on the other side of the draw, with Medvedev out, him being ousted, so who knows if Sinner, if he gets past this Alcaraz and Djokovic match, that will probably be an easy final for him to win, which remember he won last year. But Djokovic was surrounded by some controversy by the local Australian media, where they came out and heckled him, saying that he was a has-been, and I believe even overrated, among other comments. And in the on-court interview after his victory the other day, he gave him the stiff arm. He told that guy, I can't think of his name right now, I have to pull it up, but I believe his name is Tony Jones. So he said, I want an apology before I stand in front of you to get interviewed. And he had to do a mea culpa. So for Jones, he had to retract those comments. And I know a lot of it, maybe, I can't say it's personal, I don't know that. But you got to remember, a couple of years ago, where he had flown into Australia to perform at the Australian Open, and because he wasn't vaccinated, he had to be put on ice, was in a holding pattern for a couple of days before he was shipped out of Australia. And remember, he didn't participate in that tournament. I believe it was 2023 that year, because he did win in 2022, but it was weird. He performed in 2022, won the tournament, and in 2023, they said, you cannot stay here, you got to go. So I don't know if there's any hostility or animosity towards maybe the fans there and the government, who knows. But I don't know if Tony Jones had an angle there to try to get at Djokovic in that regard. But again, wrangled the feathers of Djokovic, and he got a ribbing there by Djokovic. And of course, who knows if he's going to be able to stand face to face and interview him afterwards. I get it that an apology was admitted, but I don't know if it was accepted by Djokovic, so I'll have to wait and see on that. And then you had this other scenario with Danielle Collins and how she was being heckled by the crowd in her match against Madison Keys. And Danielle Collins was just egging the crowd on and blowing kisses after winning points, although she lost the match to Madison Keys. But it was a situation where she was kissing her backside and just doing all these different kind of things, and made some comments toward the fans, just saying, oh, thank you for coming out. Pretty much like thanking her haters, I guess. But the fans got the last laugh, because it's not as if Collins won that match and she was able to live to see another day to where she could maybe add some more fuel to that fire. She was unable to do so after that loss to Keys, but who knows? Maybe the fans there will have a long memory, and if she's able to participate next year, maybe she'll try to use that to get herself to the next round or get deeper into the tournament. So, yeah, you had a lot of hostility and a lot with the crowd there and some of the players. And one note from last week, I know Medvedev lost, which was a bit surprising. We know about Stefano Tsitsipas losing his match, as we saw, but Lerner Tien, the young Vietnamese kid at 19, beat him in a 4-hour and 49-minute match, which had ended at what? Past 2:30 in the morning. And I know that Medvedev frustrated and was unable to outlast the young 19-year-old, but you didn't get a lot of upsets. The other one was Naomi Osaka, and I thought maybe after her getting to the third round, that maybe even into the weekend and beyond, that would be an underlying story coming into this week. But as it was, she did lose in that third round match and was unable to get past, I believe it's Danielle. Let me just make sure I get her name right. I don't want to butcher her name because you know me with these names, people. So Osaka, she actually had to retire in her match. She didn't lose. She retired in her match because she had an issue with her abs. And by doing so, had Belinda Bencic advance and move on. But for Osaka, who looked like she had a lot of gas in her tank, but for whatever the reason, her body betrayed her, so she was unable to move on. So that's just a tough break for her, but hopefully we'll see her at the French and maybe go deep into that tournament, as we'll see there. But other than that, you still have the big players at hand, as I mentioned, on the men's side. Same for the women's side. Iga Świątek, Aryna Sabalenka, Coco Gauff, etc. As we get into this week, and let me see if we can do an update here before we bid farewell. Tennis here, because remember, they are ahead of us. And we see a breaking deal here in baseball. A free agent, maybe not a Pete Alonso / Alex Bregman. And I'm not trying to make them out to be Bryce Harper, Manny Machado of years ago, but I'll get to that late breaking signing in a minute. I just want to get to the tennis before I wrap up. Sinner and Świątek advance to the quarters. No surprise there. We talked about Sinner getting past Holger Rune, no surprise. But Iga Świątek advances. Petra Svitolina, you know me with these names, people. My apologies. Or Alina Svitolina, I believe that she does have a sister. And if she doesn't, my apologies, because all these names are right now a jumbled mess. But Alina Svitolina, she will face Madison Keys, and she had beaten, in the process, just to get this straight, Veronika Kudermetova. Oh my goodness. I know. You know I can't pronounce. I should put a clip here for everybody on YouTube to watch. I'm sure you get a laugh or two out of that. But for the big players that are still involved, nobody has been upset, as I mentioned, so everything is good on that front when it comes to the Australian Open, as we are now into the second week. And we'll, of course, monitor it and see where we land on Thursday's podcast as to how far these players have gone. But to close out, a big signing. 5 years, $90 million for one Anthony Santander as he goes to the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, the Blue Jays, they have been left at the altar, obviously with Roki Sasaki. Who knows what's going to happen with Vladimir Guerrero, as there's been talk about him being traded. Although, light rumors, nothing that seems to be imminent. But the Blue Jays trying to do something here. And with all their money, the Rogers family, and trying to stay and keep up with the Joneses, with the Red Sox and the Yankees in their division, they bring on Santander. They get him from the Orioles. And as we know, the Orioles have done pretty much squat. I mean, when you think about it, Charlie Morton, that is their big offseason signing, and they also signed somebody else's recently, but nothing that's going to certainly move the needle. But when you have Santander to go in that lineup, 5 years, $90 million, he did hit 40 home runs last year, but is a guy more feast or famine, goes up there, let's see what he's going to do, as he knows the AL East very well. So that has been a late-breaking signing that has come about here as Toronto tries to fortify their roster, as they try to see what they could do and maneuver here, as we're now, think about it, people, for position players, it's about a month before they report, maybe the 20th, maybe a couple days prior to, but pitchers and catchers are 3.5 weeks away. And you know I'll be here all for it, as I'll have my arms open ready for spring training, despite the fact the Mets still do not have a guy like Pete Alonso signed on a dotted line. That'll do it, my good people. Another episode just about in the books, as always. Thank you so much for passing by. Thank you so much for carving out precious time out of your day to listen to what it is I have to say about what goes on in the wonderful world of this toy department of life called sports. And if you haven't done so, please subscribe, rate, review, throw me a few stars, write a review, Apple, Spotify, as well as the YouTube channel at JAYREELZ. Go there, people. I'm going to have an announcement in the next 10 days or so about a big event that's going to take place in early March. So keep your ears and eyes peeled on my YouTube channel or any of my socials, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, the JAYREELZ podcast, as I will keep post on that. More so on YouTube and even TikTok. So stay on board with those two platforms in particular. And if you want to hit me up with a question, comment, or suggestion, you can do so at the JAYREELZ podcast at gmail.com or the aforementioned social media accounts. I'll be more than happy to follow up with you guys and gals, because whether you do or do not know, this is what I love to do, people. It's in the blood, it's in the DNA. Talking sports since birth. If you haven't heard the passion, fire, fury, energy from my voice, then I don't know. You're going to have to rewind and listen to this again, or you're just going to have to come back on Thursday's podcast to hear what I have to say. Because as an independent podcaster, as an independent content creator full-time, and I've been doing this almost a year, people, trying to carve out some income, trying to get as much support as possible. And obviously, without you people, there's no me. So continue to follow, continue to support, because like I mentioned, as long as I'm in front of this camera and in front of this microphone, I will give nothing but 100 and 110% talking about what it is that I love. Whether it's on the diamond, ice, gridiron, hardwood, golf course, racetrack, tennis court, boxing ring, octagon, you name it. From my lips to your ears, from my heart to your soul, from where I am to wherever you are, the JAYREELZ podcast always comes correct, direct, and in full effect. From the South Bronx to South Beach to South Central to South Pacific and all points beyond, peace, love, and God bless everybody. And until next time on the JAYREELZ podcast, on the flip, baby.